So many questions.
Welcome, Yamhill County, to Speaking Frankly. I'm your host, Howie Harkema, and our tagline is, "And how we doin'?" Well, today we're doing really great. Our topic is Kris Bledsoe for Yamhill County Treasurer in 2020. Welcome, Kris Bledsoe.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's an
Appreciate
honor
it.
to have you here. So, why are you running for the position of Yamhill County Treasurer against Stan Premazich, who is a former Yamhill County Commissioner?
Well, first of all, I'll clarify one thing in that question,
Yes.
and that is I am not running against Stan Premazich.
Who are you running against?
I filed first,
Woohoo!
so he's running against me. Just make that clear.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but the reason I'm running, and I would run no matter who was running,
Yes.
is that I have an extensive background in finance, and I serve on the Investment Advisory Committee for the county, and so I'm very familiar with the duties of the treasurer. And one of the things that concerned me when Mike Green, who's the current treasurer, said he was going to retire is how do we get someone to replace him? He's done a wonderful job. He's moved the position to the point where we have a very good investment portfolio. And because it is an elected position, there is always the possibility that we could get someone elected who did not know anything about finance.
Right.
And that was of great concern to me because they could undo some of the good that he has done. Now, there are parameters to make certain that they can't just go hog wild.
I'm sure.
Yeah, but they could create some problems. And one of the important things that the treasurer does is manage the cash flow and therefore any of the funds that are being held by the county, taxpayer money.
Sure.
And when they do that, of course, the commissioners, the county commissioners, need to know that that's not something they have to worry about.
Right.
So you need to have somebody that is going to be responsible and responsive to the commissioners. Now, the commissioners cannot tell the treasurer how to invest or what to invest in, but so ideally, they shouldn't even have to think about it.
Right. So would you talk about Mike and some of the mentorship that he's given you over the years?
Well, Mike Green and I were friends before we were involved in the Treasury position together. But in fact, and I know this will sound odd, but the mentoring that has gone on is more from the Investment Advisory Committee to Mike, because Mike had the wisdom to choose people who had extensive experience, extensive understanding of liquid investments, fixed income investments. And so when he brought us on board, and he reinstated the Investment Advisory Committee.
Oh, good.
And because he wanted that input. Not that he can't do it on his own, but he likes to use the advisory committee as a sounding board. And so sometimes we give him direction. When he brought me on board, he wanted me on the advisory committee, and he also wanted me to replace him as county treasurer.
Right.
And in order to do that, best was for me to become familiar with the position and the duties. And I was thrilled to do it anyway because I love finance.
Sure.
I love it.
And we're going to get to talk about all of that.
Yeah. So he asked me to be on the Investment Advisory Committee, and and then when he was thinking about retiring, he suggested that I might be interested and consider running, and I told him I'd think about it because I am in semi-retirement, and so it was, well, how big a job is it? And I found out that it's something that I can do within a reasonable time frame and do well.
So talk about what the Yamhill County Investment Committee is and what they do.
Okay. So part of that I covered. But the committee is made up of, well, it used to be made up of 3 citizens. Now it's made up of 5 citizens.
Okay.
And but currently we have a vacancy, and hopefully we'll have another vacancy when I win treasurer.
Right, of course.
But the advisory committee only meets once a quarter, meets with the treasurer, and the treasurer goes over all the reports. And we as a committee ask questions. We always do,
Sure.
particularly me. I like to ask questions. And so that we make certain that we understand what he's doing and why he's doing it. And then he will usually ask us what direction we think he should be taking in the next quarter, whether or not he should be buying longer term, shorter term
Right.
investments. Sometimes we give him input as to whether or not we want a bond. We think a bond that is callable, which means that it can be called back before it reaches maturity,
Sure.
is a good or a bad idea. There are some state funds that we can invest in, and we talk about those funds, compare how that's doing with Mike's portfolio.
Sure.
And it's advisory, which is in the name, is exactly what the committee does.
So the people that are on that committee, are they mostly CPAs and investment people, or?
Actually, they are investment people. The one thing that we're really fortunate to have, one person we're really fortunate to have on the investment advisory committee is Jim Schottfeld. I think I said that wrong.
Right.
And he is the president of First Federal. And prior to being president of First Federal, he was an investment portfolio manager for another bank. So he has years of experience with exactly the same kind of investments that we do. So we have him, and we have one woman is a former finance manager for the city of Newburgh. We have another woman who I actually have not met. I met her once. I'm not certain of her background, I'm sorry to say. But Stuart Jacobson, who's in investments, used to be on the advisory committee. I am already talking to people who I think might be good possibilities to add to that committee, so that when I come in January, I'll be able to replace the people who have left with people who I know have the background and the training. Like, if you came and you wanted to be on the investment advisory committee, we'd say, sorry, we like you, but no, you got to have a really good background.
Understand that.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, and CPAs are helpful, but it's actually, CPAs are, generally they tend to be like tax accountants, and we're not dealing with those issues.
So, Oregon Treasurers Association, talk about that.
Okay, the Oregon Treasurers Association, which is an association made up of treasurers.
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. And they communicate with each other. I am, at this point, I joined, I think they probably have never seen anybody join who wasn't a treasurer. I joined, so because I'm not currently a treasurer, I'm affiliated member.
Right.
But what they do is they work together to help each other figure out, what trends are, and a lot of it's through email. They have a conference once a year where they try to do some training, bring new people on who maybe aren't familiar with how to do the treasurer's job, talk to economists and that sort of work. They are a good group of people. It's a good asset to have.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So talk about your personal background and why you think that might help in this possible position here.
Well, one of the things that, I'm 69 years old, which means I'm old enough to run for president. But I'm going to run for treasurer instead.
Yeah.
But what that means when you're 69 or 70 or anything, is that you've lived a lot of life.
Yeah, experience.
And one of the things that happens, I moved to McMinnville with my husband to be with our daughter here, I think it's 14 years ago.
Wow.
Well, I had retired, and so nobody, or at least most people, have no clue what I did before I showed up on 3rd Street.
Sure.
And what I did was my whole life was centered around finance. And so I have a degree in economics, which I love, and I have honors in economics. And to me, that was, I can't believe I get credit for taking these fantastic courses. And from there, I went to work in banking and instantly got into the management training program. And so I was trained in all
Levels,
areas,
yeah, sure.
all areas of banking. And I was a commercial loan officer, and I was a bank auditor for a while. And then I left retail banking and became an investment broker, a registered representative, passed the Series 7 license, which
Wow.
is no small deal. But you have to do if
Sure.
you're going to be working directly with Wall Street brokers.
Sure.
And what I did, and I was trained at a bond house, which means that my training had a heavy emphasis in bonds. And the work that I did for that company, which was called Foster and Marshall, was recommending to my clients investment instruments. That my clients were all very conservative, mostly retired. So I would look for bonds and investments that were suitable for them, but I had to buy it directly. I couldn't just buy, I could buy a mutual fund, but I've never been a fan of mutual funds. So if you came to me, I would recommend, depending on the size of your portfolio, I would recommend, a mixture of bonds, and I'd be looking at the credit quality and of course the yields, but I would also want to preserve your assets.
Right.
So it's a balancing act. So that's what I did in that position. I also trained, I worked for the American Bankers Association. I taught economics.
Oh, awesome.
For a while. And I also worked for a bank later on, setting rates so that we had for our loans. So I had to follow the investment market and look at the spread and make certain that we were going to make money when we made a loan. And there's a lot of other things that I've done that I can't remember.
Well, we're going to talk about some of them right now. So aptitude and enthusiasm and education. Talk about that for a moment.
Well, the education, once again, is that degree in economics with honors, but there's also the training program that I went through in order to be able to pass the Series 7. It was I think it was 3 months.
Wow.
All day, every day.
Wow.
It wasn't an online course. It was in the seat all day, every day. And then I've taken a year of accounting. And I do have a master's, but my master's is in pastoral care from a Jesuit university. That was something that I did later on in life. It's kind of like a second phase of life. Something that was when I was kind of retiring, was thinking, what can I do to serve?
And that was for hospitals, right?
It was for hospitals, yeah. And my special training that I received at a clinical setting at Swedish Hospital in Seattle was specifically in oncology, cardiac care, and intensive care.
Yeah.
All hospital-based. And most of the patients I was dealing with were quite ill. And I dealt with the families as well as the patients.
That must have been very difficult.
It was so rewarding that I can't say that it was difficult, because every time I worked with a family, I was able to improve the quality of their suffering.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't make them happy.
That makes sense.
But I improved the quality of their suffering.
So talk about aptitude and enthusiasm for a minute.
Aptitude. Well, I think I think we all have our little things that we like to do. Well,
Right.
From the time I was a little girl, I liked math and I liked numbers, and once again, being of a different generation, I was not encouraged to work with math and numbers. I did. But it never would have occurred to me at that time, I thought I had to be either a nurse or a school teacher, because that's what women did.
I get it.
Yeah, and so when I found economics accidentally, and that brought out that aptitude, that's logic, that's taking basic, the words escaping me, but basic concepts and building upon them to come up with solutions or predictions of what may or may not happen. It's logic. And I just loved that stuff. I mean, it was like, so when I first got on the investment advisory board after taking kind of a vacation from all of that, and I went to a training. I did do some training with the state on their investment portfolio, and I went to the first one, and I was like, oh, and it was like, they're speaking my language.
I totally get it.
I was like, oh, this is so exciting. I came home, and my husband couldn't make me shut up, because I said, this, and there's that, and it was like, I just got wired, which is why I even more wanted to fill the role of treasurers, because for me, it will be a daily joy to serve the county in that way.
Yeah. So the Yamhill County Treasurer has fiscal responsibility for the entire county and the money that inputs into it from taxation.
Right.
So what can you do with that fiscal responsibility to let people know how transparent you want to be?
Well, and that's the one thing, and I told Mike this, and so I don't feel bad about saying it, but his reports are just a little dry.
And complex.
Complex. They accomplish what he needs to accomplish, but they're hard for people to understand.
Yeah.
Plus, nobody sees them anyway, except for the Investment Advisory Committee and the commissioners, who generally, I think, just kind of don't always
mull
understand.
It over and
it's like,
call
okay,
it good.
Yeah. But so what I want to do is I want to take the material from all of the sources that we invest with and consolidate it into a report that would be understandable and that could be read at a glance. Instead of having 12 pages, I would like to have 2 pages. And we have graphics, and we have bar charts, and we have pie charts. And because everybody learns and understands in a different way. Now, some people can get really excited about an Excel spreadsheet.
I can.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. But some people just want to see a pie.
Sure.
It's like, oh, okay, there's the red color, that means this and that. And so what I want to communicate to people, and I'd like to put this on the website for the county.
Right.
And simplification, not all the gory details, but
just a summarization.
Yeah, so how much do we have in municipal bonds? How do we have in corporate bonds? What do we have with the state fund? All of that would be spelled out. What kind of yield are we getting? What does that translate to in income for the county? How much money are we managing? The fund is anywhere from $15 million to $50 million.
Sure.
And it's very high. In October, everybody pays their taxes, and then through the year, they use the money. But those are tax dollar funds, so people need to know.
And the budget comes out of that as well. So.
Right. So people need to know how that's being managed, and so I want them to be able to, if they choose to do so.
Right. So conforming to investment policy regulations, because there are regulations.
Here they are. This is the investment policy, and I printed it out today. It's 16 pages of very dense information, and it describes exactly what you can and cannot do, what kinds of instruments you can invest in.
Right.
And this is what keeps the treasurers all over the state in control.
And where can they find this document?
This is actually on the treasurer's page on the website now.
For Yamhill County.
For Yamhill County. And every county's investment policy is a little different, but the basics are the same. And what the most important thing that this does is it sets out the priority for how money is supposed to be invested. And so you have, I like this prudence, that's kind of a fun word.
Yes.
standard of prudence to be applied. This sounds kind of legal, doesn't it? And it tells you who you can buy things from, what are the objectives. The objectives are the preservation of capital, very first and foremost. It needs to be liquid because it needs to be accessible for the county.
Right.
And liquid meaning not that it's not in a longer term CD, but
Right, we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, and that you get the best return that you can without putting the principal in danger. So principal's the first priority.
So again, if you're interested, you can find that on the Yamhill County Treasurer's portion of the website if you want to know what those policies, investment policies are. So, possible resource for community and maybe even management after you get this position.
Yeah, I'd like to explore that.
Yeah.
One of the things, and Mike Green talked about this as well, and he has he hasn't had the time to follow through on this, but I think that it would be great to be a resource for people who are investing money throughout the county, the cities, or clubs that are nonprofits.
Sure.
So that I could go out and not necessarily manage their money, although I think that that's something that could be done. It would take some figuring out.
Right.
But helping them figure out their own investment policy,
Right.
their own parameters, which will make everybody feel more comfortable, donors and
Everybody.
Yeah, everybody. If I'm going to give you $1,000, I want to know that you're going to manage that well.
Right.
And so I would like to be that resource. I would love to be able to, go to local clubs, and like Lions Club, Kiwanis clubs, give little
Rotary,
presentations
all
about
of it.
basic, bond 101.
Yeah.
Like what is a bond? First
And
of
most
all.
people don't know these things.
No, they don't. And even though nothing that I will do will have anything to do with the stock market, that's part of the parameters.
That's good.
And I think that many people feel that the stock market is the only way they can invest.
Yeah, but it's such a risk.
It is a risk, and it's gambling. I mean, I sold stocks. I get it. But, there are many other ways to slowly make money.
Right. So we have about 6 minutes. Interest rate risk, short-term bonds versus long-term bonds.
Okay, interest rate risk is actually can feel like a complicated issue. Interest rate risk is, let's say, right now, today, I could buy a 2-year bond that would pay 1.75%.
Okay.
Which is in fact what it is now. It's terrible. Or I can buy a 5-year bond that pays 2%. Well, if they say, okay, well, we'll buy the 5-year bond at 2%. Well, then, for some reason, rates go up tomorrow.
Right.
And the rates for the 2-year bond are now 3%. And I still have this 5-year bond.
And you can't touch it.
I can't. I could sell it, but I'll sell it at a loss because the value of the bond goes down when
Right.
the interest rate, the going market interest rate, is higher than what the bond is paying. So what you have to continually, and this market is so hard. It used to be very simple because short-term paid low rates, long-term paid high rates. That was easy, but it's no longer the case. Sometimes the long-term bonds pay less than the short-term bonds. But if I buy the short-term bond and it pays 2%, and then the long-term bond market gets squared away and it's paying 5%, well, I have now, even though it's short-term, I'm
Right.
locked in. So that's what interest rate risk is. And what was the other item?
I think you answered all of that. Let's talk about credit risk versus market rate risk for a moment.
Oh, okay. Well, market rate risk is what we were just
Right.
talking about, sort of. But then there's the credit risk. And now, if you're buying a treasury bill or bond, it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. So if that goes, we're all in trouble. It's like, okay. So that's as good as it gets. Now, The rates are always a little lower, consequently. And so, so you look and you say, okay, well, I'll buy this corporate bond. And I'll use an example of one that I happen to have in my own portfolio. I manage a pension plan. And I made this choice, but I have General Electric. Well, okay, that's, so, I'm sorry. Yeah, General Electric. So that sounds good. That's stable. That's a big company, right?
Huge. Been around for a long, long time.
But when I bought it, and I got higher rate of return than other companies that you would think would have the same. So I got paid a premium and interest rate for this bond. And what the story behind that bond is, GE has been rated as being a little bit risky for the long term. And so the bond, the underlying bond, is rated AAA. There's a bond service that starts with triple B, starts with AAA and it works down, and triple B is no longer investment quality. And so I personally made that decision that I thought, okay, that is an okay risk. Now, as treasurer, I could not do that.
Right.
Because it's too low of a rating.
Right.
And so there's no free lunch. If you look at GE and it's paying 5%, it might be a reason. So you have to look.
So will you receive information from staff on the financial industry market that's out there today?
Not from staff.
From whom?
I would have to, well, I'm really going to have to find that on my own.
Yeah.
And I just talked to Ken Huffer, well, I sent him an email yesterday, requesting that I be given funds to subscribe to services that will keep me up to date on what's going on daily, on what's going on in the market and the interest rates. And so it will be a lot of effort, which I enjoy. This is the part I enjoy, of staying on top of what's happening. Now, I can always talk to the state people.
Right.
But they're busy people. But I could talk to them, or if I'm buying from the company that holds our securities, they could also answer some questions. But basically, it's up to me as the treasurer to make certain I know what's going on, which of
So you
course
have to do research all the time?
all the time, research all the time, not only on individual securities, but trends,
Sure.
Economic predictions, pitfalls.
Forecasting and all of it.
The whole thing.
So talk about ongoing education, because we only have about a minute left.
Okay. So ongoing education, that would be, as I was stating, I would need to be continually reading and studying what's going on in the broader economy. And the best way that I can do that is to also maintain relationships with other treasurers.
Oh, sure.
Maintain relationships with investment professionals in town, which is, I think we have some smart people in town.
Yeah, we do.
That could help me with that. I could pick up the phone and say, does this make sense? So develop those relationships as well.
So what makes you the best candidate for Yamhill County Treasurer in 2020?
First of all, education. I do have the BA in economics, and my experience, which is extensive, and my passion for the work, and the fact that I'm kind of I think most people would be surprised, but I'm kind of an introvert, and I like coming.
You?
I know. I'm friendly, but I'm an introvert, and I like being behind a desk in an office behind a door.
Right.
Working on this and learning and growing and developing things, and it's not a job for a politician. It's like, finally, this is something that I can do that is fits with my personality. So I worry if anybody thought that it was political, because it's not.
Right.
I mean, they're going to be really disappointed, or are they going to get to go and
But this is a nonpartisan race.
It's a nonpartisan race that the position, it's debatable whether or not it should even be an elected position.
Exactly.
Really, because it requires such extent, and I have that. And so I'm the best person for the job because if I were 30, I couldn't afford to do it.
Yeah, I
know?
get it.
Yeah, so
So, Kris, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you.
And I hope that you'll follow Kris's race as she proceeds. There'll probably be some debates and
Hopefully.
different things across the board. She has a Facebook page. So get involved if you want to. Kris's email has come up a number of times here. So if you want to work on her campaign, do such. Thank you for watching today.
thank you.